Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here today. I wanted to start with a story about my dad. He grew up in an impoverished small mountain village in Puerto Rico, and he moved to Spanish Harlem as a child. As a young man, he took dance lessons so that he could meet and impress women. So whenever I watched West Side Story, which was his favorite movie, I thought of him in that famous dance scene at the gym where they're tearing up the floor before they start tearing at each other. He was unsure of what he wanted to do when he graduated high school, so he took a more traditional route. He joined the Army, and it was there that he was exposed to being a medic. And he ended up studying to become a certified, registered nurse anesthetist. And it took me a long time when I was a kid to learn how to say that. He married my mom, a beautiful flamenco dancer from Ecuador, and they had 3 daughters. When it was time for me to arrive, my mom was in the hospital dressed all in blue, and boy, were they surprised. They were expecting a boy, but I came along. My dad was raised with traditional Latino values, and thus was a little unsure on how to guide his 3 daughters, aside from what he thought was key to success, education. So the 3 of us were expected to excel at education, like many of you, and that we did. So there were traditional careers that he could guide us to, and I didn't want to do a traditional career. So I ended up having many debates with him on the role of men and women in society. Honestly, it was a key driver for the work that I do in diversity, equity, and inclusion. When it came time for me to choose college, the one piece of advice that he had for me was study at a Jesuit institution. I didn't know why at the time, but I'm so glad that he set me on this path, and I'm really grateful for that. I never asked him why at the time, why a Jesuit institution? But I did my due diligence of looking at different Jesuit colleges, and Holy Cross became the clear front runner. It had everything that I pictured in my mind of my college experience: picturesque New England campus, excellent professors, small classes. I was in love. Back in those days, acceptance and rejection letters came in the mail. If you got a thin letter from a school, that could only mean one thing: rejection. I was so excited when I got my hefty package from Holy Cross, and I knew I was on my way. The next decision that I had was what to study. What major should I pick? So I did what most people probably do, is think about, what do I excel at? What am I really interested in? English became the clear front runner for that. I love to read. I love to look at passages and go a little bit deeper into their meaning. And a favorite of mine was Watership Down, in spite of the horrifying 1978 animated movie, if any of you have seen that. So how did my English degree lead to me becoming a DEI executive, to owning my own business today? And I can say with full confidence, it's Jesuit values: cura, personalis, magis, discernment, service rooted in justice and love, solidarity, and kinship. Cura personalis is a Latin phrase meaning care for the whole person, dedication to promoting human dignity and care for mind, body, and spirit, reflecting a deep appreciation of each individual, affirming the goodness and identity of every person. These principles for me were the foundation for diversity. Magis is the value of striving for better, striving for excellence. This value embodies a spirit of giving and providing service to those in need, and working and standing with the marginalized. In the workplace, it helps me to think about whose voice is not in the room. Discernment, the ability to see God in all things. What is the Spirit calling me to do? And service rooted in justice and love, that's how I see equity. Solidarity and kinship. In my career, this is the most important value. Holy Cross prepares students like yourselves to be wiser, and more compassionate as they take their next step as women and men for others. Not only is this value inherent in all of our Holy Cross experience, but is also how I see inclusion. In my work, I ask, how does one lead with compassion? So what do these Jesuit values look like in action? Spirituality, commitment to education and justice, and active engagement in the world. When conducting research for this crosstalk, I came across the term cannonball moments on the Holy Cross website, and it made me pause, and I loved it. What are cannonball moments? So for those of you who are not familiar with the story of St. Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuit order, he was hit by a cannonball in his leg during the Battle of Pamplona, and it changed his life forever. He had a long recovery ahead of him, and he did a lot of reading. He wanted to read works that were popular in the day, but his sister-in-law, Magdalena, gave him 2 books, one on the life of Christ and the other on the life of saints, and that changed the way he saw the world, changed what he felt it means to be a caring and engaged human, setting him on the journey towards God and founding the Society of Jesus. Similarly, my experience at Holy Cross, they created a place where I could figure out who I am and how I want to live. Today, I understand that as a lifelong process. I had many cannonball moments along the way since entering Holy Cross. The first one being addressing my own narrow-mindedness. I was assigned a roommate from rural Minnesota and also rural Maine, and I grew up outside of New York City. And me, in my narrow-mindedness, assumed that we would have nothing in common. How could we? Our experiences must have been so vastly different. I was naive. That couldn't have been further from the truth. We had so much in common. We both loved reading, and we were both first-gen students. And really what bound us together was our love of rice. We both grew up eating a lot of rice. My parents are from Latin America, her mother's from Vietnam, so how grateful was I when she showed up with her rice cooker. We lived on the 4th floor in Clark, and there would be cold winter nights when we would call the Kimball hotline, so that was a thing. You'd call up and you'd find out if they were serving mozzarella sticks for dinner or what was on the menu. And then we could decide, do we want to brave the cold wind and go down to Kimball from Clark 4, or would we make rice in our room? So, and beyond bonding over rice, we had so much in common. We lived together all 4 years, and we're still dear friends today. And that was really rooted in the Jesuit value of kinship. There were cannonball moments in the classroom, too. During my academic career at Holy Cross, one of my favorite courses was medieval women writers. I heard about women troubadours. Who knew there was such a thing? Mystic writers like Teresa of Avila, Hildegard of Bingen. In poetry class, I became enamored with the works of Worcester's own Elizabeth Bishop, reading her poem In the Waiting Room, which is about identity, especially as a LGBTQ+ writer. Made me think, what other stories are not being told? After Holy Cross and early in my career, those cannonball moments did not stop. My first job was at Scholastic working as a recruiter, and I loved it. It was a mission-driven company that really aligned with Magis. They provided literature for all children, not for a segment. It was during that time that I understood I could help others in the workplace too, supporting a just and humane culture. I was charged with leading the summer intern program, which was funny because I wasn't that far out of college, and I had to place 80 students across the company. People applied from all over the US for art and editorial jobs. What I needed to do was to reach out in New York City to schools which had underrepresented students to ensure that we had a broader employee base there and talk to them about careers in publishing. What became clear is that we had a lot more work to do. Many students thought working at a publisher meant you were an author or a writer. And what really energized me was seeing how widely open their eyes would be talking about different opportunities within publishing. They were leaning in to listen intently. I knew that I needed to do more in this space. Diversity was just emerging as a field at that time, and at that time it was just about the numbers, just getting people in the door. It wasn't until later when companies got much smarter and realized another Jesuit value was essential to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was kinship. What is their experience once they walk in the door? While I was at Scholastic, I also lived my life as a woman for others by volunteering on a board for an organization called Madrinas, which is for the advancement of women in the workplace of Latina heritage. I was able to demonstrate skills that I learned at Holy Cross, making connections, going beyond superficial insights. It was through this board experience that I became connected with one of the most fun job I had, working with Microsoft. I remember it as if it was yesterday. It was Friday, I was at my computer, it was like 3 o'clock. It's like, what am I going to get done before the end of the day on Friday? And this email lands in my inbox from a fellow board member of Madrinas. And she was on the global DEI team at Microsoft. And it simply said, I have something I want to talk to you about. So what's the first thing I did? I called my husband, Jason, and I said, I think it's going to be about a job. And sure enough, it was. And after 8 interviews later, I was joining Microsoft. And I was scared. It was joining the major leagues. And what I discovered quickly was that the skills that I learned here at Holy Cross actually fast-tracked my career at Microsoft. I readily made connections across seemingly disparate projects across the HR organization. We'd be in meetings and people just wouldn't see that, oh, this piece of work is connected to this piece of work and we should be working together. So by remaining simultaneously attentive to details and aware of the broader context, I was able to form informed comparisons and uncover the connections for others too. Curiosity and questioning, testing assumptions, sharing perspectives, all of these things I learned at Holy Cross. I was quickly nominated to the High Potential program at Microsoft, and my manager informed me it was because I brought not just issues, but solutions and insights. My holistic approach to DEI, embedding priorities and work across the HR organization at Microsoft, aligned with their approach. I loved working in an emerging field at a pioneering company. It was ever evolving. We were getting smarter too, leveraging neuroscience into our learning solutions. Starting then and to this day, I read the latest research on neuroscience and behavioral psychology, understanding how they impact workplace dynamics. And I really credit that to my English major and the love of learning that I acquired here at Holy Cross. It enabled me to approach and understand this science, even though it wasn't in my chosen field. More and more, my career tried to pull me out west. It was before the pandemic, so I could see that my career progression would slow if I wasn't out in person at Microsoft. And I wanted to stay close to my aging parents. So I left Microsoft to lead the function at a big law firm in New York, so I was able to stay home. And that's when it hit. Our collective big cannonball, the pandemic. It fundamentally changed how we all worked, learned, and connected. I thought I had learned a lot through that experience, and I could spend the rest of my talk sharing what I learned. However, that wasn't the biggest cannonball moment in my life. That came in 2022, when Holy Cross saved my life, literally. I call it the summer of dying, jokingly, and you'll understand why. During the pandemic, I established a meditation practice in order to help me manage my stress and to be connected with my body. I just finished meditating, was reaching over to my cup of coffee to have a sip and start reflecting upon my day, which I normally did. What's up today? Then I remembered, oncology appointment with my husband, Jason, who had just been diagnosed with cancer. This is where I insert he's okay, and he's here too. I started to experience a crushing, burning sensation in my chest. I was having a hard time breathing. Jason was downstairs getting breakfast ready for the kids and lunch ready for school when I texted him. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. He bounded up the stairs 2 by 2 and asked, what can I do? And I gasped, call 911. So he did. And by the time the EMS showed up, the pain had subsided, and I was sitting on my couch dumbfounded as to what just happened. The text said, oh, you probably had a panic attack. And I thought, I just finished meditating. That doesn't sound right. Maybe I should call my doctor. He said, well, he'll tell you just to go to the hospital and get a blood test. And I was like, well, I won't call her, but I will go to the hospital with you. So I begrudgingly went to the hospital, was sitting in a corner. They really weren't paying much attention to me until my blood test started coming through. And my troponin levels are going up and up and up. And then the energy changed. And there was a lot of frenetic checking in with me. How are you doing? How are you feeling? I was scared. My husband was scared. I had the typical tests, but my situation was not typical. The attending cardiologist said he could see me in 2 weeks. The attending physician told me, drink less coffee. I drank 2 cups of coffee a day. I don't really think that that's really what the issue was. It was the med student who, looking at my record, noticed my history of migraines, and she connected it to Prinzmetal's angina, or a coronary artery spasm, a rare condition. Her conclusion was dismissed, and I was released. They said, come back, see the cardiologist in 2 weeks, since they didn't see anything wrong. Luckily, in the midst of all this chaos, Jason called my best friend from Holy Cross, who's here, Sue. She connected us with a fellow HC alumnus who at the time was leading cardiology at Stanford. He put me in touch with a women's heart specialist in New York who confirmed my heart attack. I was on the path to my diagnosis and the treatment plan that I'm still on today. She told me I was lucky. I was lucky to be educated to remain curious and ask questions. It would have been easy for me to take the hospital's advice and follow up in 2 weeks to see a doctor that didn't think I had an issue. That is how Holy Cross saved my life. This cannonball, as you can imagine, really disrupted my life. I had to take stock of what was working and what was not working. I discovered I was stifling my voice at work. My expertise was not being leveraged, and that I needed time to take care of my whole person. I was working with a career coach who rightfully pointed out that, wow, you really don't seem excited about any of these opportunities that you're interviewing for. She's like, why don't you start your own business? And that decision was easy. I was ready. I was ready to share what I had learned to advance my field and to make a difference in individuals' lives. I had to pivot. I wanted to focus on care for the whole person, compassionate leadership, working with leaders who demonstrated care for their people. I tapped into the Holy Cross Network. I've never encountered a fellow alumnus who did not want to help, whether by grabbing a cup of coffee to give advice, to facilitating introductions to people within their own network. That alone is invaluable. Even today, when I made the leap to start my own business, I connected with Maura Sweeney, who's here too, to discuss coaching and to ask about other alumni with whom I should connect. There is humility in asking for help because none of us has all of the answers. There is always more to learn, appreciate, and contemplate. Cannonball moments are unavoidable. Embrace them. They are part of life, and that is how we grow. I look at you and I see a sea of women and men for others, and I have hope, committed to social justice, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I leave you with this insight from the Jesuit tradition and from our own Holy Cross mission. It's what drives me and what I aspire to, living a life of dialogue. When one person listens insightfully and interprets what another is saying, and then respectfully expresses their own experiences in turn, both individuals gain new understandings of themselves, their peers, and the world. Dialogue about these questions among people from diverse academic disciplines and religious traditions requires everyone to acknowledge and respect differences. Dialogue also requires us to remain open to that sense of the whole, which calls us to transcend, challenges us to seek that which might constitute our common humanity. A life of dialogue will not divide us, but will bring us together. Thank you.